Hello folks. Well, as y'all can see, it's a pretty cold day here where we live here in East Texas. It's below 20 degrees, which is pretty darn cold for around here. And even with that heater going and the electric heater I got in there in the tool room with the door open, it's still cold in here. It's real well, you can see that. But anyway, we've got quite a few things here to do on this, and I was going to start this morning, and my neighbor called. That's who that was, and his vehicle, a belt had broke on it, and so that's what we were doing in the earlier in the video. Was I was trying to help him get his belt back on his car where he could get to work tomorrow. And so anyway, so we're probably going to have a short video today about this because of that. I figure I'll just add that into the video. But anyway, we got several little things here we got to do. Number one, we've got to build the little brackets that are going to hold this tubing onto the lever. And a couple other little things, and then we'll be at a point to where we can start lining everything up and welding everything together. Let me move that video camera so y'all can see a little better about what I'm talking about. Okay folks, so what we've got to do in order to get this thing done is we've got to cut these temporary welds. We've got to cut them off of there, get everything ground down, and then get these two brackets put in straight so that we can weld these onto those. And they've got to be straight, because if they're not, this thing's going to bind up. It's just not going to work right. So that's where we're at. We've got to get everything now properly straight so that it can be welded. And probably what we'll do is we'll get everything straight, we'll tack weld everything together, we'll make sure that it is going to work without binding up. Then we can take it off the mower, get it up on the workbench, and actually weld everything together. But we want to know that it's going to work right before we actually weld it. Now then, now we grind all that down, get everything like it needs to be, and then we'll be able to put these back on there where they're perfectly straight with these rollers and be able to get it welded together. All right, folks, we are ready to start welding it together. I'm going to do a weld, small tack weld. And whenever I do one, I'm going to move this. And I'm going to do that every time. That way, if there's anything that's going to cause a problem, we'll know when we get to the problem so that we can fix it. So, we don't want to weld everything together and then realize at the end that there was a problem and then have to disassemble everything. So we just take our time and get it all welded together. Okay, we cut that rod off right there, then this greaser won't bump against it. Okay, so I'm putting a little bit of a gap right there. Okay, it ain't gonna hurt to have a little bit of movement, but if I weld it up with everything together and it swells up a little bit or something moves as I weld, warps, then it would put a bind right there. And it may still put a bind after we weld it, because we have to weld both of these onto that rod. Okay, so all we can do is just go for it. I'm getting everything as straight as I can get it, because y'all already know once all that's welded up, there's no way to ever take this apart. Now I could make it where it could be taken apart, but it would be a lot more work and a lot more video, and be quite frank, I need to get this thing done and move on to something else. And y'all are probably ready to move on to something else too. Oh, another thing we got to do before we weld these two, we got to put something in here that's going to represent the actual stop, so that we don't, so that these don't go as far back as they're going. Alright, well, still moving, it ain't binding up, so I'm going to keep on welding. Alright, still looking good. Okay, we've got to get the gear mounted on there. And when we put a weld on that gear, it's going to be in the way. So that weld for the gear, welding the gear to the shaft, has got to be flush. In other words, we can't have any weld between this and the gear. Okay, so I went ahead and I put a mark where the gear needs to be so that we could got it in the right orientation. That way we can get the lever out of the way and then weld it onto the shaft. So what I did, as y'all can see, is I created a bevel in this gear, and that's going to be for the weld so that we could weld the gear onto the shaft and not have welds sticking out where the other part of the lever would not be able to go up against the gear. So there we go. Now we'll fill that in with weld. Okay, we got enough weld on there for now. We'll get the lever back on there after I grind that out, make sure it's all going to work right, and then I can go ahead and finish welding it off. Okay, so what we got to do is we got to drill a hole right through the hair for an arc lip to hold the lever on. We've got a little bit of a gap here, but I don't think it's going to bother to have a little bit of a gap. We don't want it too tight. Alright folks, well we pretty much got all that done, and we got a couple little things. We got to build the little bracket for the spring to go on this, and we got to build the little things that are going to hold the tubing on there, but all that is done. It's all working good. We've got to build a bracket that'll go right in there, so you know, we'll cut that off and slide it down between these and weld that in. We'll do that on the next video, and we'll be able to go ahead and get everything ground down, you know, pretty it up, get it all painted up. And we may go ahead and get everything together and go ahead and demo it, try it out. You know, go hook it on a trailer, drive it around, see how it works. Then bring it back in the shop, pull our bolts, slide the unit off, put it up on a workbench, do all the sanding, grinding, you know, and all that type of stuff, then paint it and put it back on there and it would be done. So, kind of makes sense to me to go ahead and try this thing out before we go ahead and paint it. Anyway, I appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see y'all later.